There we go. Hello folks, and welcome to Becoming a Real Life Superhero. We have something a little different for you today. James Beamon is my mentor and one of the best short story writers of our time. He's been nominated for Hugo's, Nebulas. He's a director of the Science Fiction Writers of America, which is an incredibly prestigious and very limited group. He has, I don't know how many short stories professionally published now. It's like his bibliography. When you go to his website, you got to scroll and scroll and scroll and scroll and scroll multiple pages. And probably one of the most influential people, actually in my life, just in general. So I'm super excited to have him on today on our little show, and we're going to talk about how you can create heroes in real life, and how you can use your writing skill to inspire things like social change. James, thank you for being on the show.
All right, and hello everybody. And just to kind of update everyone, including you, my status. I used to be a director at Science Fiction and Fantasy Writers of America. I turned the reins over from that the 1st of July. So I'm no longer doing that. Big load, big responsibility. It was fun while it lasted. It's great to have time to actually focus on writing versus the business of writing. So, the people who are running things now I trust and like. So hopefully they'll steer the ship in a place where we all want to be.
Absolutely. Well, and you're also a editor on Escape Pod, or you were, and then one of the editors as well for the for UFO.
I am the king of. Yeah, I'm the king of part-time jobs. So yeah, I used to be on the Escape Pod as an associate editor. I've been on UFO, which is unidentified funny objects, for like 3 or 4 iterations, maybe 6.
And that anthology's been nominated for awards as well. I mean, it was one of the quickest anthologies, I think, in history to get onto the SFWA's acceptable markets list, just because it is so high caliber. So I mean, this is some serious stuff you're doing.
I take my funny seriously, if we're gonna laugh, let's make sure it's fun for everybody.
Let's make sure we laugh.
Right.
So yeah, I appreciate that so much. So actually, segueing from that, your humor was kind of a big drive for your ability to mentor other creators, which is something you've taken very, very seriously, especially through like working on critters.org and talking to a lot of different writers, not just myself, to try to help improve their craft and really give a voice to other people, not just yourself. And I think that's one of the first things I want to touch on and ask about, is what kind of tips do you have for new creators or experienced creators for how they can kind of be a hero in somebody else's life with critique and mentorship? Because I mean, I know one thing that really helped me was you'd give harsh critique, but it would be funny, and so I'd be like laughing, crying, and they'd be like, oh, it's terrible, but it would be so funny. So obviously humor was a big one. What other things have you found help when you're trying to mentor or support somebody else?
Well, I think outside of the humor, I think one of the things that is very useful is to tell the person what they're doing and why it either works or it doesn't. Now, I run across a person who was like the king of like not run-on sentences, but they weren't really sentences because they didn't have a noun. The noun will be in the front, like Tom hit the car, then start running. Then they got shot. And it was a thing where the subject was implied, and I had to break them down. Like, I see what you're doing. You're trying to, do this action really quickly, but some of these things don't translate well because there's no object. So we have to translate what you're saying, and it's not making sense. So you just slow that down, that kind of thing. And he came back and said, "Wow, I really didn't think of it that way. I appreciate it." Nothing funny about it, just me saying, this is what I saw, this is what I didn't like it for this reason, but I understand why. And if you give people that kind of why, instead of just saying, I don't like it, it just didn't tickle my fancy, then it doesn't really help anyone if you just do that. You have to, at least, and I think as a person who is critiquing, it helps you grow within your critique, because If you don't like something, then you should be able to soul search and figure out why that is. And if you can't, then maybe it's just bias, maybe it's just personal preference. And if it's so, you can state that up front too, which also helps in the critique process. Like, this is just me. Other people might think this, but I don't like, when the chosen one is like extra special chosen. And you see, it's just like, I like this kind of incidental chosen ones when they've been proclaimed for 1,000 years, and we knew exactly when it was going to give, who's going to give birth to them, and everybody came with incense, and then but yeah, that's just me. This is me just giving examples and trying to basically express in a concise way, which is better on paper for me than spoken. I don't know if you've noticed a ramble.
I think we all do. I piss people off more on paper. I have gotten myself in a lot of trouble, but definitely it's easy to ramble aloud. But that's very helpful stuff. And how when we're thinking about evaluating other people off of or not evaluating other people, but like helping, being more specific, basically, is very helpful. Another kind of feature of mentorship beyond just critiquing their work. I've noticed that you kind of build a relationship with a lot of different writers. I mean, in the I only remember my password. I don't remember the name of the group. What is that Neo-Pro group? It's the.
You're talking about Codex.
Yes, I'm talking about Codex. When I don't have a lot of time to be on there, but when I was on there, I would see that you were always like supporting a bunch of other people all the time, and as a result, of course, obviously, people appreciate that. They kind of want to support you back. What is kind of your impetus in kind of maintaining all these relationships? Is it just kind of a love for the craft, or like why do you do that?
Well, to basically like qualify what I do, it's not so much maintain, which is really problematic. You and I have a relationship that's been built on years, and there's times where we don't see each other, or talk or whatever. That's me. I develop relationships. Not that good at maintaining. There's a few rare folks that will always be around, but it's like Codex. I haven't logged in for like quite some time since the last Codex mentorship drive, really. But I love meeting new people. I love seeing where they are. I love helping out where I can. And then I kind of am like Kane and Kung Fu. I'll go off and have another adventures elsewhere. And I'm starting to understand that that's fine, even though there's people that, when I think about like, man, I really miss this person. I wonder what they're up to, but I still don't like actually go out and reach out to them because I'm still doing X adventure or Y adventure. Like, just kind of like surmise. I had the escape pod UFO, did my own little editing stint with Amazing Stories and Director at Large and a few other things, trying to write a novel, playing Shadowrun stuff, just random stuff, just all the time.
Well, and then of course there's family. So it's like that I'm impressed by the fact that when you do, you're just always very positive when you are around, at least online. It's and I think that's encouraging and helpful because I think it really strengthens other people to kind of reach their own dream. And that kind of, rather, you don't really seem to have a spirit of like, oh, I'm competing with these people. It's more.
Here's the thing. Like, one, life's too short to be bitter or angry about anything for very long. Two, this is not some zero-sum game where if they are reading your story and love your story, they're going to be like, well, I'm done. I cannot read another thing from anyone else.
Never in my life. I'm full.
Like I am full. I have just reached my story time limit. I cannot. I don't even want to watch reruns of what's happening or anything. I don't have room in my heart for more stories. So them reading you won't preclude them from reading me, and vice versa. So I love to see people get on. I love to see people get success because that means that the people that I was rocking with, the people that I looked at the story and said, "Oh man, I really see what you're doing here." It's the whole world's starting to see it.
Yeah.
And so in a lot of ways that validates what I was saying the whole time. Like, I remember when, Now
I
everybody
remember
sees it.
half a box in space.
Half a box in space. There was half a box, and now there's not. And now people can see, like, man, this is a great story. This is gripping. You know?
I think that's really actually a pretty unique feature because having been, in and out of a lot of different writing communities, I have seen a lot of like jealousy, especially men maybe above 30. And especially getting older. I don't want to stereotype. I'm sorry. Women can be
That's
jealous
my
too.
bracket, so hopefully
I'm
I'm
so
defying
sorry.
stereotypes. I'm cool with that. Like, oh,
I'm
you're
so
not like
sorry.
all the other boomers I've met. You know.
So no, like I don't mean to, yeah, and there's plenty of wonderful so I definitely want to stereotype right that age bracket or males at this age. But
No
I
boomers
just have
be.
seen some really, really jealous people who they almost want to nitpick, not because they want you to be better, but because they don't like how much attention you're getting. And they'll make
Mm-hmm.
snide comments like, yeah, you've done a lot of marketing for that. How's that going?
Mm-hmm.
Like, oh, that was a lot of marketing. And then like other comments, like, I think, and then like later say, I think marketing too much is kind of like, masturbatory because if it's good, people will see it automatically. Just like, I was like, oh, thank you. Appreciate that.
You know.
By the way, did you just get picked up by Kevin J. Anderson? It's like, I don't want, like the guy, like people who are like, they just want to stab you a little bit.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of like, thank you. I appreciate you stabbing me a little bit. But,
Mm-hmm.
like they get jealous or like they say, I think you should just stop writing this book altogether. I think
Really.
you should just give up.
Wow.
And years later, I'm doing okay with it.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, so I really think that positivity, I think it's hard for people to evaluate in themselves when they're starting to feel jealous. And I think that's kind of one of the first tips I've learned from your example is that, like, if you want to create heroes out of other people, if you want to be a hero in other people's lives, especially in the creative realm, you gotta look out for jealousy, and you gotta be
Oh, yeah.
willing to understand it's not a zero-sum game, just like you said.
Yeah. Yeah. It's one of those things where, like, we can all, like, tell powerful stories. Like, I remember, like, in Codex, like, years ago, people were kind of railing on Dan Brown because he writes poorly, and he kind of does. But, and this is what, they're basically attributing the fact that he's so, like, Queen Angels and Demons, and the other one, the Da Vinci Code. Like, he was like, just, his name was Household. They're like, how did he get on?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he just lucked into it. I basically said, it's no such thing as that. There's no such thing as luck in terms of that. You cannot, like, trick and luck out and get millions of reads and millions of people loving a story.
Yeah, like there was
He
something
tapped
that
into,
connected with people.
yeah, he tapped into the
Regardless of whether
zeitgeist.
it doesn't connect with me, right?
Yes, exactly.
Something worked.
Exactly. So he tapped into the zeitgeist and, like, really got a story that got people talking to each other. Like, could this be real? Could this be, what's this? XYZ.
Yeah.
And that's not luck. And it doesn't matter if he writes poorly. If we're writers, but ultimately we're storytellers.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes we might forget that because we're looking at punctuation or grammar or ellipses and how the space is supposed to come after it. Whatever. You're supposed to be a storyteller. Tell the story. And at that time, your bad punctuation disappears. Your weird, cliche kind of terms, they go away because people are just transported.
People want the story. And I think it kind of helped me to, like, when I looked at somebody like big, that I was like, how is this person, to, instead of thinking in that terms, instead of thinking like, man, how is this person that successful, think, hey, how is this person this successful? What can I learn from this person? So, like, I'm not a big fan of the belief system behind the writing philosophy of the author of Game of Thrones. Some of his interviews have kind of put me off. But he's doing something right? So instead of, like, being jealous or, like, crapping on him or being like, man, like, this guy, like, this is gross, like, instead of, like, doing that, more like, what's working? Well, how is he expertly tying together so many different storylines, and it's flowing and people connect with different characters, even though there's, like, so many characters to keep track of. That's a very difficult skill to master. So what can I learn from, instead of trying to, like, at people? It's just like you said with Dan Brown. It's like, what take their success as an opportunity to learn. Don't take it as a, well, life is unfair and everything sucks and everyone's gonna, everyone has bad taste. And it's like, well, okay, that's not gonna get you anywhere.
I
Like,
mean, but don't get me wrong. There is that 1% out there, and that 1% you might be listening to this. You might be this unrecognized genius. Truly, I'm not being facetious. And you will die unrecognized, and then like 50 years after the fact, people will like unearth your tomb and be like, "Wow, this guy was ahead
best
of his
writer.
time, or this person was ahead of their time. It's just amazing." And then there will be all sorts of postmortem congratulatory praise for your stuff. And man, sometimes that works. I mean, artists have that problem too. You
Mm-hmm.
know,
And, oh, and I
it,
told my husband I'd actually I'd come to terms with that happening, and I was like, that's actually kind of better because then you don't have to deal with the stress of being famous. Because like as you more and more people get, like, everyone wants to be famous, but it's like not worth the hate a lot of the time. Like just with the 2,000 people I have on YouTube, and I'm not famous, but it's too many people, and people get nasty, and then people want to tell you that you suck, and some people want to tell you that they want to assault you, and other people want to stalk you, and other people, call you all kinds of like N-word things,
really.
because
Oh
of, and
wow.
it's like, yo, like, leave me alone. Like, go away if you don't like it. Like, so it gets, and nobody wants to hear it, but there is a benefit to dying with no one knowing you.
I mean,
Benefit,
I
there's a
think
benefit for people reading your stuff while you're alive, but I will not be super sad if, like, I wouldn't mind being like rediscovered after I'm dead. I'm not saying that people have
oh
to do
no.
that and have to
I
like
think
never market themselves. I'm a big
I think
marketer, but
I think writers have like a special place where they could be like household names, but still virtually unrecognizable on the street.
mm-hmm.
Like Dan Brown, I could pass him by on the street.
I have
I know
no
some people
idea
will
what
check
he
him
looks
and be like,
like.
"Oh, that's Dan Brown." You
Yeah.
know, I mean, like Clive Cussler. I would walk past him in a Walmart. I don't even know if he goes to Walmart, but do writers go to special stores where people don't recognize them? There's like 5 people who write that we could recognize by face. That one's George R. R. Martin, another Stephen King, and there might be like 3 or 4 other folks, but
I
those are
would not
individuals.
be able to recognize J.K. Rowling. It's just not a face that is, for me, like, I just wouldn't be able to recognize her on the street.
And
And
it's one
she's
of the things.
so famous.
Yeah, and the thing is that because they don't get a whole lot of like just snappy pictures like they're in movies and stuff, you can see their mannerisms. Like they can walk, be standing by you in the line, and you're fine because you don't really you can see the steals and you know what they kind of look like, but you don't expect them to be where you are, wherever you are. So somebody had to be like, "Oh, it's you," and then you're like, "Oh, that is them." But you see, so I would take fame because like unless I did some crazy and just off the top world changing story time, I would like be able to function without
Hopefully
getting
people
mobbed.
won't bother you.
Yeah.
I think you make a great point there about, I think it does make a difference if you put yourself out in video or not. I think that does, like you said, I think that does make a difference. Well, hopefully you won't get stalked after this one comes out. So the kind of next question I want to go to, we meandered, but that's what we do. We're meanderers.
Yep.
Kind of getting back to like how to be a hero with the writing. Talking about how something is resonating with people, with the things that they love and with the things that they read. Um, and how do you, as an individual writer, like, create characters in a way that supports the reader, sparks their imagination, and then kind of like that experience that Whoopi Goldberg talked about having, seeing Uhura on TV. Like, how do you create characters that I'd like to chat a little bit about actual craft here, creating characters that create real life characters that inspire somebody to be bigger than they are. So that's kind of the first part of that question, and the second part is incorporating on a more aggressive way, incorporating satire, deeper themes, or like meaning for social change. Because I mean, the reason books get banned and burned because they have power, right? That people are
Mm-hmm.
afraid of it. People get angry and want to get at you online a lot of times because of power, because there's something going on there. So what strategies and techniques have you found to best leverage that power, either for character creation or satire, when someone is creating a story?
Well, the thing about my stories and really the characters involved in them is that I look at them and try to treat them as if they are instead of my creation and with what I will, the things that they want, as if someone else is telling me about them, their habits, wants, desires, things that drive people. And if I treat them as people, then they'll behave as people, and at least in my own mind and understanding. So sometimes, in like my third book is indicative of that, where I wanted something to happen to the characters, and it just didn't feel right or sit right. So I kept putting off the book and putting it off because ultimately it didn't. Ultimately, I realized that the character wouldn't have done it. The character did not want to do this thing.
Yeah.
So I had to, address that and write according to what they want. When they say character-driven fiction, that's what they mean. It's
Mm-hmm.
not plot-driven. Yeah, you have cool scenes coming up, but does the character, naturally derive there? You, as the author, have to kind of move that all along in a way that makes sense. If you want that scene to happen, then it has to be you have to kind of engineer the things underneath for that to happen. You can't just make the character say, you know what, it's time to go to Nepal, just arbitrarily. You just you have to kind of organically grow the situation.
It's in some
Um,
ways almost like internally cocking Chekhov's gun. Like instead of,
exactly.
like the external Chekhov's gun, it's like the internal Chekhov's gun within the character's behavior. And I think that's
Yes,
something that's, because you've
exactly.
seen my writing, like it's so difficult to learn that, to learn just, but once you kind of do, the writing goes a lot faster. The
Mhm.
last couple books have
Yeah.
been a lot faster since I've been trying to make that shift, where
Mhm.
because the character starts doing stuff and it's like, oh, okay,
Yes.
all right, let's go with this plot.
Yeah, you've
um
been surprised by your characters, right? Where
yeah.
you look like, I don't know, where did this come from?
Yeah.
Exactly. If you have yet to be surprised by characters, that means that you're still trying to move this thing along because you want it, and that's something that um, once you stop doing that and let the characters speak, then they'll become real to not just you, but to the people that read them, and they'll like identify with them, and they'll want either to wish them well, to see them in ruins,
Hmm.
depending on whether you made a great character or really evil villain. They want people. The readers want things at that point,
Yeah.
and it's not just stuff to read because they're bored. It's like, this is really cool.
Well, and it's kind of like, uh you man, I lost my thought because when you said that, I started thinking about Drew's.
Oh, okay.
And I was like, oh yeah, like, because I really want to know what happens to this bad guy. Yeah, absolutely. I
Hey,
guess
so
that
for the
thought is
folks out
gonna.
there, she's talking about my Pendulum Hero series. My chief villain is Drew's Rosencrantz. And yeah, he does diabolical things at times, but he's actually like fairly like reasonable in his diabolicalness.
Well, and
Yeah,
I think
at least
that's
I think
another
so.
thing that makes a big difference is when writing villains, like having a whole person, um,
Mm-hmm.
you know, uh, because like, so the minute that he was angry about something that had happened to his daughter, even though his daughter is his enemy throughout the story, the minute that somebody had done something, to her that was, crossing a line, he was
Mm-hmm.
very angry at that person. And that connects because it's like, oh, this is a human being. Human beings have good and bad qualities, and they're complex and complete. And I think that's another big thing with, like, hashtag representation matters kind of stuff. People can see the difference between you. Why are you beeping? I'm already in the interview. It's good. So, people can see the difference between you putting in a character, because you wanted to check a box, versus like if it's an actual person. If it's like, and I've always told people, like, okay, the reason I write this kind of character is because this is the kind of hero I've seen in real life. These are the kind of
Mm-hmm.
people that I have connected with, regardless of, gender or skin color. This is how I feel. So this is what's there. And making it kind of a little more natural, especially for those of us who are not own voices authors. People can tell. People can tell if you stick it in, because it's like, oh, it's popular right now to have this kind of character,
Right.
because it's not a person. It's a cardboard cutout.
Exactly. It's very one dimensional. It's just there to check a box and get your work like highlighted so you can get on and be famous and
Well, and people really resent that, because people see
yeah.
that. People see that it's like, okay, you're taking space away from own voices authors, actually. I mean, that's why some people are becoming to the extreme where, like, they only want only own voices authors, which is, I mean, reasonable. But it's because of that, because they see other people like co-opting the
Mm-hmm.
stories and experiences of other people, because it's not genuine. It's not coming from a place of genuine, like, this is who they are, this is the person that I care about. It's
Mm-hmm.
coming from a palette swap perspective, where you're trying to take something instead of give something to the community. And I think that gets back to, when you're creating stuff, because you mentioned, like, as you're letting the characters drive, you're letting the plot drive. It kind of touches on the difference between a pantser and a plotter. But at the same time, there's got to be some balance, because if you want to have strong satire or you want to have a strong theme, it
Mm-hmm.
helps to have plotted out in advance certain bullet points that you're going to hit at different places. Like, you have to have some direction. um, can you touch a little bit on that, on, like, the difference, because we've talked about that before, the balance between pantsing and plotting, and where, when you need to change stuff, and where you're going, and how, because pantsing, I think, is stronger for character fiction, but I think
Mm-hmm.
plotting is important for your themes, and especially things like satire. I was wondering if you could touch a little bit on how to balance those things, and how to kind of, because you're the king of satire, and like poking fun at
Really.
stuff. I mean, I think so. I've really liked a lot of the very, very genuine way you express certain stories. I mean, especially, I mean, your orc story in the UFO was one of the first stories that I ever read, kind of, and maybe I'm just ignorant, but kind of touching on, and I saw stuff a lot later after that had been written. I saw other fiction about this topic, but kind of on the topic of, like, like, almost race in Lord of the Rings, right?
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, and I love Lord of the Rings, but it's a very good point that, like, okay, why are all orcs bad?
Right.
Like,
Exactly.
what's up with this? What's up with this thing? And you did it in such a humorous way. And there's other stories that you've done that are very, like the story that was actually about erectile dysfunction, right, where the alien has his
Oh.
his antenna problem. It was just a silly story, maybe, to you, but to me, I felt like I get that, like, it connects with a human issue. And I know
Mhm.
in that case, maybe it didn't have to be so aggressively plotted, because the character in that case drives the story. But sometimes, in order to have some of the twists you have at the end of a short story, you have to have some structure. So how do you balance those two things?
Well, the thing is that I don't know if this is just my creative mind, like working things out. Um, but the short stories, I don't really plot in a sense of having an outline. I like plot it in my mind in a very short way where I like this thing and I like this other thing.
You have kind of
Like
a
say
general direction up in here.
exactly.
Yeah.
So for the alien story, it was literally me wanting to do something for UFO. And I thought about the alien with the antenna problem, and the girls are looking at him like, oh man, all aliens have it, it goes when you get a certain age, that kind of thing. And he's just like, but I wanted to really play with the idea of the ET thing where ET comes and there's a kid, there's pieces, everyone's having fun, and flying bikes, and just like, okay, well, I'm gonna play this for laughs and have him go to this on some kind of like exorbitant, price vacation where it's supposed to get his screen back in the step, and he just hates like the whole experience because who wouldn't? He's stuck in this world, marooned, and he's supposed to. Okay, so it was how I got there. It wasn't me necessarily calling into attention anything other than you know taking people out of their comfort zone by giving them something they can relate to and then putting that person you're relating to through a crazy experience that's like can be fun. That's kind of where my satire comes from. Just like there's a few when there's a certain thing, because there are times where I want to talk about things and I want to kind of highlight things. Um, I kind of look at that thing and unwrap it from that perspective until I get a, a story and a character that kind of lives in that vein. The best case example I can think of right now of that is when I wrote um, Nothing Ventured, which is an AE magazine, it's Canadian. It's big in Canada, but at this with that story, I wanted to kind of talk about the ironies of the modern world.
Did
So instead
I
of,
think I read that one too, right? What was that about in general?
it was a scientist who wanted to discover nothing. He wanted to
Oh no, I
discover
haven't.
literal nothing.
Yeah,
Like,
no, I
because
haven't.
there's no such thing. Like, when you see nothing is like literally figurative for us.
Yes.
There's no such thing. Like, if you point to empty air, there's going to be stuff in it, including air and molecules. Stuff. He wanted to find nothing.
Yeah.
So he was on a search for the theory of nothing, and so he went around trying to get tenure, get like research grants for nothing. And the way I use the word nothing is like it's something, but yet still nothing. So like it played with the word nothing, and it played with the fact that there was geopolitical things at stake, like China and the U.S. competing, and him going to the moon. It was a very like it sounds complicated, but it was really a quick story that talked about the ironies of the modern world, where he was basically trying to do something, even though it was sounding like nothing, and you know that was kind of that.
Yeah.
Um, Outside of those kind of things, and once you guys read it, you'll see what I'm talking about. It's a really fun story. Um, so when I try to unpack things like that, then I use satire. Sometimes I don't. Sometimes I take it straight up. Like the most recent story I published was about colorism in the Black community, which is something that I guess like a lot of white folks don't really worry about. But there's
It's a thing, and I'd actually like to read that one. I haven't seen that one. Yeah.
yeah, that was in the what was it called? It's called Black science fiction. It's literally called Black Science Fiction.
Yeah.
Gothic Press, nice little cover, awesome cover, looking epic. So I was like, okay, great. But yeah, I wanted to call that kind of thing out, and I played it straight. And so it kind of helps to know what you want to go for.
Mm.
It helps when you know whether or not it's something that so tragic you laugh at it, or it's so understated you want to be serious.
You do a little bit of thinking ahead of time, and I think that's something because we talked about structure when I was getting Whipping the Dead published.
Mm-hmm.
That like
I love that one.
one of the big thank you one of the big problems with it was that I changed the structure about halfway through. I had a structure at a certain point, and then I changed it, and once we fixed it and actually continued the structure, I restructured the entire story in order of the Fibonacci sequence. People dug that, and that worked. So it's like thinking I can't remember the name of the guy whose class basically you made me read. But the FFO guy, what's his
Oh,
name?
Bruce Holland Rogers. He's on
Yes,
Science Fiction Online. Yeah.
exactly. So talking about, like understanding a little bit ahead of time and just a tiny bit of thinking about it goes a long way when you're actually putting it down on paper. And I think that's kind of where the balance is. Kind of actually, since you touched on colorism and started to talk a little bit about that particular anthology, you also have an anthology already out, or on its way out, about police violence, right?
Oh yeah, the No Police No Future, which
Yes.
is like no as in police equals no as in know your worth, no future. That
Yeah.
was the anthology that I was editor in chief on. I basically went out, canvassed a whole bunch of people, like, hey, what's going on? Like, I personally read every story submitted and selected the ones that would go into it. And I'm really proud of that project. That's really, I thought it said a lot because there were some that were really funny and satirical. Specifically, Mr. False, his story was so funny that there's very few times where I will laugh out loud, like just reading, for one, because I'm too critical. But I laughed out loud not once, but on the second read and on the third read, I was still laughing. I went back and I
Ooh.
said, I cannot stop. I had to email and say, I cannot stop laughing at this thing. So it was like some a Trump fan from like who got frozen in time shows up in the future and he doesn't know Trump didn't win and he's just he's in like raw mode. The world had been defunded. It's so good.
It's a totally
Wait.
different experience, and that I mean that's powerful, right? Being able
Mhm.
to turn and it's kind of like the Jules Verne thing. It's why Star Trek was effective.
Mhm.
Science fiction especially has this power to transform the future in real life.
Yes.
So to talk with us a little bit more about that and about how getting together as a community, because now we went small, now we're going big picture, getting together as a community and creating things, and then also in your own life as a writer, like when you're looking at these big picture things, what are some ways to kind of tackle doing storycraft for huge, I mean, big situations like that, and very serious anthologies like that. Serious, not necessarily in terms of tone, right? Because it can be funny, but like the
Mhm.
content is serious. It's an
Yes.
important issue. So tell us a little bit about that, about your experience as the editor of that, how you chose which ones went in, and kind of what you're thinking about when you're looking at fiction that wants to inspire the future.
Well, I mean, the thing that I try to do is not be cynical about things because honestly, I am fairly cynical in that George Carlin vein of cynicism, where it's all bad and it's funny, that it is because none of us want to be here in this badness that swims around us, but somehow we're still here. Um, so it must be someone else's fault. So um, I look at it like and try to be optimistic about the future. And that's a big winning difference in terms of what I look for. And so when I put the anthology together, I was looking for those kind of stories where it wasn't just people trying to survive totally defunded police. It was people who had a much better time without nightsticks, and mace in the face. Because I saw a few of those. Like, man, well, we got through the apocalyptic time of no police and anarchy, but now we're here. We eating beans, but awesome. No police. Like, yeah, that's not the story. You know.
You felt it was like
So
too not realistic.
well, the thing is that there's this thing, and sometimes you have to understand where your own programming comes from, because there's, whether your parents put it into you, your peer group, TV, whatever, this programming involved with each and every one of us. And for some reason, there is this thing where if you like the only alternative to a heavily funded, like, police state force is to have zero police and anarchy.
It's kind of like
And
the people who confuse libertarianism in general with anarchy or with
yeah,
like
it's yeah,
monarcho-capitalism.
yeah, it's
It's
like,
like these
well,
are different. They're different grades of belief system. It's not two
exactly. So
extremes.
and so someone's feeding you something that maybe you wasn't intrinsic, because did you stop to think about what we're talking about? Because if you did, then you shouldn't have that same kind of thought. You didn't think long enough about it or well enough about it. I don't know. Either way, this is kind of here to show you that there are grades to this. And so when I picked those stories, there were some that were far flung future, immediately after, in between, but all this kind of stuff where we dealt with different ways to fund alternatives to police, and how a police force should look, or in a criminal justice system. And it's funny because I can say criminal justice system, and that means something different than a system of justice.
Mhm.
So in people's minds, that means literally different things, and it shouldn't be that way.
Yeah, absolutely. I
And
really wanted to submit something to that anthology. I actually had one planned out, but I missed the deadline, and I was like, well, that's what happened. I so I yeah, that's
I've
awesome.
been there.
Yep, it was like, well, and actually I had a story planned out in my head, but then I was kind of like, you know what, it's okay. My voice isn't necessary there anyway, so it's okay. We'll just I'll be more of a listener. Which I think sometimes you do have to kind of step back and be like, okay, what are the issues that I'm strongest able to speak on, I think also matters. Because while I think everybody should support good things, right,
Hmm.
regardless of what you are, sometimes it's very good to like listen in some spaces.
Oh yeah.
And sometimes it's better to, talk. And I have a tendency to be a too much talker and not enough listener. So it's a thing that I've focused on a lot. So kind of like you said, you're focusing on your cynicism. It surprised me when you said that you're trying not to be cynical, because I was like, you're a pretty
Because it's like
cynical person.
it all ends in disaster. I just like, but I try to optimistically think it doesn't. It won't if we do this, you know. But yeah, cynicism is like it's like the benchmark of good humor, you know.
It makes a
At least for
difference. It
me.
really does. It really, really does. Because humor, comedy is just tragedy that you are not in and only the main character is in. In some ways, I don't know where I heard that. It's not mine, but
Yeah.
it's true. It's
Mhm,
like, because Charlie Chaplin running around bumping his feet on stuff, that's
mhm.
uncomfortable for him, but for us, we're outside of it. We're not suffering.
Yeah.
That's in sometimes that's what comedy is. Other times comedy is like, because it's true, because it's a little different way of looking at something, and it's funny because it's true, or
Exactly.
because it's absurd, or because it's surprising. I mean, it's we got to do a whole thing on comedy at some point. But thank you very much. I don't want to take any more of your time. I think this has been great to kind of go over all these different ways that you can kind of use your writing for social change, how to improve your writing personally, and then how to work with other people to support their dreams, and basically kind of support real life heroism. So because you never know who you might inspire with your next thing. You never know if somebody's going to go out there and put on a cape and a cowl. You don't know
Mhm.
what you're gonna create. It's kind of like
Well, I will warn people not to put on the capes and cows because you might get shot or something like really bad will happen. Trying to be Batman because it's unrealistic. He's made for fabulous fiction. You do not want. You
in
think
Puerto Rico. I used to put on my bulletproof vest and go out to the areas of the city that were bad to help the homeless and stuff like that, and had a bulletproof vest on underneath my jacket. I found
I
that
see that?
you don't want to dress up and be very visible,
Hmm.
because that's a good way to get shot. You want to be a little bit less visible so you can kind of move in and out of where you need to
Exactly.
be. But I think it's good to have some equipment.
Well, yeah, you
I'm
should
glad I
definitely have
had
some
the
equipment.
my vest and my other
You should
stuff.
definitely do like if you're gonna go out and help people, do it that way. Do not be perched on top of a building overlooking the city like you own it.
Dun dun dun.
You
I've
know,
done
waiting to
that
jump on
too.
somebody.
I've done that too. I've jumped from building top to building top, but I didn't have no cape or cowl on, because then I would get arrested by the police.
Were you running for somebody, or that's
No,
just fun?
this is a thing that I used to do in that was back in college, because I was
Hmm.
exploring, because there were these murals and stuff underground, and sometimes the only way, literally hiding from security guards on the roof of this building so I could get into this building and then get down through the pipes into the underground area, literally be like, literally the security guard flashlight coming over where we
Okay,
were.
so you were running for somebody. Okay, it's a heist. You were doing a heist. Okay, that makes
I did
sense.
not
Okay.
steal anything. I did not harm
Oh, well,
anybody.
you still an access. Okay, that's great. You know, that you wanted to get someplace. They were trying to say no. You're like, no, I'm getting through. You know,
They
okay.
have whole in the sewers. It's not really sewers, it's steam tunnels. But in these steam tunnels underneath Charlottesville, there was Greek poetry and murals. There was like a freaking mural of like Jesus, like that people had created, like hidden art that they'd created only for adventurers who like got there. There were also like racist graffiti that was less enjoyable, but the majority, but there's it's just some fascinating experiences. But
Yeah,
anyway,
it
like you
sounds
never
fun.
know, you might make someone go out and do something exciting. I mean, I used to walk my husband home underground to get into his dorm and walk him home at night before we got married.
Okay,
He
pretty
he
awesome.
fell in love with me because of this ridiculous adventure thing that I was, that I can't anymore because I'm sick all the time. But you know, like you never know what you might create. I think that we often are limited in terms of what we think is possible,
Mm-hmm.
and we need science fiction to stretch the limits of what we think is possible so that we can
Exactly.
inspire and create real life heroes. So,
Exactly. That's a great place to end it because that's awesome.
thank you so much again for your time. Can you plug real quick where people can find you and what people should buy?
Not on rooftops, not on the ground. I am I'm just out here. You can Google me, James Beamon. I have a website which I pronounce Stick Crystal, but I'm not going to spell it because that takes too long. Who cares? Type my name
We'll
in,
link it
James
below.
Beamon, Beamon. That will take you to Amazon. My novel series, Pendulum Heroes. She loves it. I think you will too. And I have like you said, like over 40 short stories published on my bibliography. A lot of them are free to view. So yeah, come hang out with me. Maybe you'll see something you like. And thanks for your time. Thanks for putting up with me as I ramble.
Rock on. It's awesome.